Shalom to all the audience in 3 continents. I would like to begin by thanking the organizers of the Kinneret Zoom Symposium, Software for the Past, for honoring me with a keynote speech. Let me start with some preliminary notes. I am a historian and not a software engineer. I use computers and software for my research, but this is as far as it goes. Every now and then, I have a vision of how a software may serve me in my work, and I have a software engineer, Mr. Jacob Fagerson, to whom I tell my vision, and he turns it into a custom-made program, which assists me in portraying pictures of the past. So I am not a person whom you would want to ask questions regarding the development of your software. My apologies. Basically, I am a social historian who is dedicated to grassroots history. Today, the importance of grassroots history is not a debatable question anymore. It is part and parcel of the historian's work. Since Mark Bloch had marked the way by asking questions on the lives of ordinary people and the forces which set them in motion, rather than the lives of kings, prime ministers, generals, and other dignitaries, not such a long time has passed, just 90 years. But in the course of these 90 years, social history has changed its face. Tracing the human experience of ordinary people who usually do not dedicate time and money to immortalize their existence for future generations poses a great obstacle to the historian. It forces us to an arduous labor of collecting a huge amount of data, of small details, the use of which is the only way to recreate the picture of these ordinary people's lives. Grassroots history means telling the story from the bottom and not from the top. Whereas Bloch and his disciples had to pave their way through an enormous amount of minute details collected from church records and judicial court records, etc., adding them one to the other by painstaking handwork, the world of computation has changed completely the social historian's work of our generation. However, if you imagine even for one moment that computation can replace the historian's hard work, I shall have to disappoint you, and in a few moments, you will understand why. Software can assist us to portray a more accurate, a more interesting, a more flamboyant picture of the past. It cannot shorten the way to achieve this goal. The purpose of my presentation today is to display and explain a methodological system developed by me for the documentation and study of large-scale cemeteries. The methodology was developed in the course of my fieldwork in the Jewish cemeteries of Turkey in the years 1987-1990. The idea of this documentation project was the brainchild of a Turkish art collector named Nuri Arlases and a renowned historian of the Ottoman Empire and modern Turkey, Professor Bernard Lewis. The computerized database that you will be consulting in a moment is named after Professor Lewis, who accompanied it from its initial stages almost to its completion. Both Nuri Arlases and Bernard Lewis are no longer with us. The project was carried out with the support of what was then the Annenberg Research Institute in Philadelphia and the Jewish community of Istanbul through the Quincentennial Foundation for the commemoration of the settlement of Sephardic Jews in the Ottoman Empire. Later on, Tel Aviv University took it upon itself through the Goldstein-Goren Diaspora Research Center. It took 2 years of fieldwork of 3 photographers, 20 workers who traveled with me across Turkey, and then 10 years during which I toiled with 6 students on the deciphering of the inscriptions. It took 4 more years to create the first version of the custom-made software, and it was only in 2015 that Professor Simcha Goldin, the present head of the Diaspora Research Center, found the funds to upgrade the software and put it on the internet. So it took almost 30 years to bring this project into fruition, into the stage I will be showing you today. There is more to be done in order to brush it up, but it can already be of great use to scholars and students, and even to laymen who are looking for their ancestral roots. It becomes clear, I believe, that creation of the software does not make the historian's work easier. It brings it into precision. At the same time, turning 61,000 tombstones and 100,000 photographs of tombstones into a usable database couldn't have been done without computation. From the initial stages of the fieldwork, the system was developed while bearing in mind the inevitable creation of a software that will enable the optimal use of the voluminous amount of data for historical study. Let us start with a survey of the possibilities and limitations of the computerized database. I would like to start with the limitations. Devising a software of any kind of large-scale data cannot be done without a deep knowledge of the material. First and foremost, the scholar who plans to collaborate in devising such a software, or even one who wants just to use it, has to master the languages of the material. These might be written languages, ornamental, architectural, or musical languages, you name it. Many people who already tried to make use of this particular computerized database complain that there is no translation of the Hebrew inscriptions into a less esoteric language. It has to be clear. The database can help you. It cannot do the work in your stead. You want to learn something from a database which records the history of people who engraved the inscriptions on the tombstones of the relatives in Hebrew. You need to know Hebrew. There are no shortcuts. But this is not all you have to know. You have to get acquainted with the history of the city in which the cemetery is situated. You have to get acquainted with the history of the neighborhood in which the cemetery is situated. You have to get acquainted with the history of the cemetery itself. Why was it founded? Who enabled its foundation? Why was it abandoned? You also have to acquire a very good knowledge of the burial culture of the group who buried its dead in the said cemetery. And in the Jewish case, even beyond that, you need to get acquainted with the burial culture of other parts of Jewish diaspora. Then come some practical chores. You have to map the cemetery and its environs. You have to prepare the stones for documentation. You have to devise a documentation system that will allow you to create later on the software. You have to plan the search tools. Only then you may start collaborating with the software engineer in devising a software. But this is not the end. You still need to type the data into the software. And only at the end of this work, you get the final product, which enables to make use of the computerized database. Let us go briefly through the first pages of the website. We shall share screen. Yes, this is our website. we shall not be able to go through all the wonderful possibilities that are hidden inside this computerized database. We should just gallop through the first pages, and I will share with you a few of the possibilities entailed in it. It's not the tip of the iceberg, it's just the tip of the iceberg. It's 1% of what can be done with the computerized database. So let us begin. You have several short introductions: the nature and purpose of the computerized database, and then you have a short historical introduction about the Turkish Jewry, the history of the computerized database, the organizations and individuals involved in creating it. What does the computerized database allow you to do? And then a short historical introduction about the Jewish Turkish cemeteries in general. Then comes a very important section, which I called navigation instructions. We shall not delve into it because of lack of time, but I have to stress that if someone really wants to use this computerized database, it is essential to read the navigation instructions. Otherwise, you will get lost. When you finish reading the navigation instructions, you can get to the cemeteries themselves, and you need to choose a cemetery. So I decided for you to choose the Hasköy cemetery in Istanbul. This cemetery was the burial place of Jews from the districts of Hasköy and Galata on the northern shores of the Golden Horn. It was established by an order of Sultan Selim II on October 23rd, 1582. And the firman was issued, I quote, in favor of the elders of the Jews and their agents. Now, you enter the section of the cemetery and you push this button and you get a Google map of Turkey. And if you you dive like an eagle from Turkey to Istanbul, to the neighborhood, and to the cemetery. If you get back to the description, you get two auxiliary maps. This one is also a Google map on which I worked, which shows you some historical layers of the cemetery. I will not delve into them, but I just want to comment on a few things. This is the cemetery as it looks today, but this is not the actual size of the cemetery. The historical cemetery was much larger. The borders were somewhere here, and a lot of it was erased in 1972 while building this ring road around Istanbul, which is called the Çevre. This is the Karaite plot. This is an Armenian cemetery. This is a Catholic cemetery. The second map shows the work I was doing on large cemeteries. I divided them into lots of 25 by 25 meters in order to enable to situate tombstones in their place inside the cemetery. Otherwise, you just get a pile of photographs and documents. If you move on, these are photographs which show stages in the history of the cemetery. And I would like only to make a short stop on these two photographs. These two photographs were taken by a friend of mine in 1972 while the Chevrolet was built and part of the cemetery was destroyed. And this photo was taken by me from the air, and it shows you the location of the cemetery. This is the Golden Horn. This is the huge Jewish quarter of Balat. Part of it was destroyed at the beginning of the 1980s in order to make place for this municipal park. But this is the neighborhood of Hasköy, and in the horizon you can see Hasköy Cemetery. If you go further on, for this cemetery, I did not include in the website a long historical introduction because they've written a huge book about it. You can see it behind me. And if you push the red highlighted reference, you will be able to read parts of it. Now, if we go on, we need to go back and then to open the database. Now we are inside the cemetery, which contains 22,325 stones. We are not going to exemplify what can be done with the software through all these stones. We shall choose a small sample that will start with the creation of the cemetery at 1582, October 23rd, until 1600, 1st of January, and we have 186 stones. The number of stones do not represent, this number of stones do not represent the overall number of people interred in this short period at a cemetery. One has to take into account the destruction of ancient burials by the building of the ring road, the Chevrolet, and the use of stones for building material by the inhabitants of the neighborhood. We shall open one stone record in order to show what are the parameters according to which we are able to retrieve data from the stones. So this is the tombstone of a person called Rafael Bachar Yitzchak, and these are the parameters according to which you may look for results. You have the lot number, the stone number. This Hebrew character symbolize the style of the inscription, which is incised as opposed to other styles that in which the inscription consists of protruding letters. And this 3x1 is a code I have given to the ornaments of the stone, which are very simple. This is a vertical stone with a very simple frame. You have the measurements of the stone, the Hebrew date of death, the Gregorian date, sex, age group, and sometimes we can decide the approximate age of cause of death. And as I said, this is the stone of רפאל בחר יצחק. ציון קבורת הישיש הענב, כבוד רב רפאל בחר יצחק דוכו עדן, נפטר יום ב' כ"ג לאלול, שנת הש"ג, נשמתו בעדן תנוח. He passed away on September 20th, 1593. This is the burial site of the old and humble, the Honorable Master Raphael, son of the Honorable Master Yitzhak, resting in the Garden of Eden, taken on Monday, 23rd of the Hebrew month of Elul, on the year 5353. May his soul rest in the Garden of Eden. Now, the language is Hebrew. This is also a parameter, and the material is chalk. What does it mean? This kind of stone was brought from the Köfeke quarries at Hasköy, northwest of Istanbul, some 45 kilometers from the airport, and bringing such a stone to Hasköy cemetery involved a combined land and sea voyage of at least a day and a half, and you can imagine the costs of this voyage. Now, what can we do with these 186 stones? We shall leave our רפאל בחר יצחק, and let us see what can we do. First, we have the possibility of drawing charts that will give us all sorts of clues regarding these people. Let us see, for example, the possibility of drawing their age groups. At this point, a need of primary knowledge is already manifested. The user has to know that before the mid-19th century, one do not have numeric ages. You have age groups. Now, for that, we have to go to the personal data, decide upon a sex, male, and then what do we have? 109 stones of males out of these 186 stones. And now we shall draw the chart, and we have the age groups. We have a child, ילד, student, תלמיד, unattached, בחור, betrothed, ארוס, adult man, ish. Ish means a married man. And an old man, זקן or yashish. Now, look at this chart. 36 of the burials are of an old man. What does it mean, an old man? An old man in Jewish tradition is one who reached the age of 60. So these 36 out of 109 stones consist 33%, which means that 33% of the burials are of people who reached old age, past the age of 60. Let us go back and see what happens with the females. Now, 73 stones out of these 186 are of females. Let's draw the chart. Now, here you also have the age groups. Child, ילדה, girl, נערה, betrothed, נערה מאורסה, young woman. Now, young woman is a category that I devised. It does not exist exactly on the stones, and it symbolizes a very young woman, a married woman. She might be a mother or not, but she is young. Why did I devise this category because the age at marriage at this period for female, the ordinary age at marriage was 12 years and 6 months. And the span of time of adulthood was, in my opinion, too big to be incorporated in one category. So from 12 and a half to 20, or 20 something, I defined the deceased as a young woman, and from 2022 until 40, she is an adult woman. An adult woman is a woman in the prime of her life. An old woman, zekena, is a woman who passed the age of 40, which means at the age of 40, at the end of her fertility years, a woman is considered an old woman. And this definition is supported from external sources. Here too, you need to have a deep knowledge of the culture you are studying in order to define the age groups. And the 19 burials out of 73, it means 26%. Now, you should not compare an old man to an old woman. Remember, an old man is someone who reached 60. An old woman is someone who managed to pass the age of 40. I'm not going to discuss the meaning of these facts, just food for thought. And of course, if you go back to the charts, you have all the other possibilities of drawing charts that will enable you to get to historical conclusions like cause of death, stone types, numbers of death per period, language, material, seasons of year of death, and the typology of the stones. Let us try using another possibility that we see here, the phone book report. Nobody uses anymore telephone books, but we shall do that. And in order to do this, we shall eliminate the female category and go back to the 186 stones. In the phone book report, you have several options, and I will take the first one, which tells us, gives us a list, an alphabetical list of surnames, names, and dates of death. Now, in order to gain something from this list, we need to be acquainted with the Jewish onomasticon. You see that the first entries are empty, even the second page and the third page. Only here we start with actual family names. The reason is that in the empty entries, we could not identify the family name or it didn't exist. I would like to go back to the question of the Jewish onomasticon. All the surnames which sound as first names belong to Romaniote Jews. Let us move a little further. These names, for example, Elia Bachar Avraham, Yehuda Bachar Avraham, someone Bachar Elia, Sha'bani Bachar Yaakov, Raphael Bachar Yitzchak, etc. All these people belong to Romaniote Jews. Who are Romaniote Jews? Romaniote Jews are Greek-speaking Jews, descendants of the native Byzantine Jewry, exiled to Istanbul after its conquest by the Ottomans in 1453. But there are others, not only these, but if you look, for example, at the name Greki, Greki is for sure a Romaniote Jew. He is Greek. And then you have, for example, Halki, which is a woman whose family name shows that her family comes from the island of Halkis. And many other names, like, for example, Misitrano. These are people who are coming from the city, the town of Misistra in the Peloponnesus. So the thing is this: you need to know at least basic Greek in order to identify them. So if we sort out the surnames of the 186 people according to their origins, we come up with 45 that can be identified for sure as Romaniotes. 58 can identify with certainty as coming from the Iberian Peninsula. 7 as Ashkenazi. This is very easy. They are called Ashkenazi. And 8 coming from various regions of Italy. 2 coming from France. All in all, 110 persons. We excluded all the Kohanim, the Leviim, and all these unidentifiable surnames. Now, this is a very important piece of information which may give us leads to open many avenues that will bring us to understand the lives and deeds of members of this society. Let us go on. For big cemeteries, like that of Hasköy and of Kuzkunjur, for example, on the Asian shore of the Bosphorus, I have already codified the ornamental elements of the stones in a manner that can serve us to identify stone without a date and to tell us a lot about the culture of the society which buried its dead in the place. Let us go back to our Rafael Bachar Yitzchak and remind ourselves the code I've given to his stone, which means this is a vertical stone with a simple frame. Now, we can, just a moment, let us get rid of him. Just a moment. Yes. Let us take this code and try and see how many stones in the 186 stones answer to this definition, 3x1. Three x1 to 4. And the answer is that 159 stones answer to this definition. What does it tell us? Here we have another great example for the need of preliminary knowledge of the historical background of the material we are studying. We know from external sources that Ashkenazi and Romaniote Jews of the Middle Ages, and for Ashkenazi Jews of Eastern Europe also well into the 20th century, built vertical gravestones on the burial places of their dead. On the other hand, Iberian Jews placed flat horizontal slabs on the relatives' graves. In view of the fact that half of the identifiable names of people interred in these years were not Romaniotes or Ashkenazim, how come the sepulchral style is not Iberian? Combining the results of our research with the preliminary knowledge on Jewish burial culture, we can assume that the Jewish stonemasons of the end of the 16th century at Hasköy were Romaniote Jews, and they were those who dictated the sepulchral fashion. Now, I would like to show you what happens when we get to the 18th century. For that, we shall eliminate all this, and we shall, of course, change the time limit. We want 1700 to 1799, and we have 5,806 stones. And now we shall choose the chart stone types. Look what we achieved. 3,178 horizontal slabs. Just 527 vertical stones. All the other stones represent styles that did not exist at the end of the 16th century. 2,012 stones are of a style called coffin-like stone. 33, a coffin placed on a marble table. 1 mausoleum. 21 stones which are vertical connected to a horizontal slab. And 34 tombstones that look like a marble table. What does it mean? First of all, what does it mean, a coffin-like stone? Let me show you one. I've chosen for you one stone, stone number, yes. I've chosen for you this stone. Just a moment. So this is the coffin-like stone, and I can show you, let's see. Now, this is the code of the ornaments, and this is the verbal description of the ornaments. Stylized frame with a geometrical belt and leafage decoration. And if you look at it, this is the stylized frame, this is the belt, and this is the leafage decorations. And the belt is a symbolic belt. This is the betrothal belt the groom gives to his bride upon their betrothal. And this woman who died on August 5th, 1787, is כלו אשת שמואל גרשון. אוי, על אשת חיל, אשר מלאך מוות ביום חיימה לקחה לו, אהה בעוד יומם, ובה שימשה בלתי ראות שמחה וגילה. מלוא הבן במה רבקה, בנות ספדו. בעל מקום שמחה מצוקה לו, העיקרה שנתבקשה בקיצור שנים, מרת כלו, אשת הנכבד ומעולה, כבוד הרב שמואל גרשון, ישמרו צורו ויגאלו, בה שימשה יום כ"א למנחם, תקמ"ז. Woe to a woman of valor, whom the angel of death on a day of wrath took to himself, alas, in midday, and her sun has set without seeing happiness and joy. The son worn out bitterly weeps, daughters lament. The husband, instead of joy, misery is his lot. The precious who was prematurely ordered, the lady כלו, wife of the worthy and excellent, the honorable master, Shemuel Gershon, may the Lord guard him and redeem him. Her sun has set on the 21st day of the Hebrew month of Av, 5547. Now you see the language is Hebrew and the material is marble. In this case, this is marble brought from Marmara Island, and the price of bringing it to Hasköy is much more expensive than the price of the chalk brought from Shefakoy at the end of the 16th century. Now, what does all this tell us? First of all, this particular kind of stone, this coffin-like stone, is an exact imitation of the Ottoman burial coffins, which continue the tradition of Seljuk coffins since at least the 13th century. And I would like to show you this an example of this. Stop sharing, and I'll show you. Look, for example, at this tombstone. This is a wooden tombstone made for a person, a Muslim alim called Mahmoud Sayyid Hayrani, who died in the year of 1268 at, just a moment, I would like to make sure that you see this. Yes, to see this. The man passed away in Akshehir in the second half of the 13th century, and this wonderful tombstone is now situated and kept at the Turk Islam Eserleri Müzesi in Istanbul at Ibrahim Pasha Sarai. So this is one example, and the other that I would like to show you, just a moment, this one. These two tombstones are of marble, and I took the picture at the old cemetery of Edirne. These are tombstones from the 15th century. So you see the resemblance. What does all this tell us? It tells us that by the 18th century, the Roman sepulchral art was eradicated and the Iberian style took place. Much more elaborate stones were placed on the burial sites of the deceased. The stone is much more expensive, bigger, and the new fashion, richer and much more elaborate, emerged, sometimes, to say the least, many times, imitating the surrounding Muslim culture. Does it tell us that from the end of the 16th century, the Jews of Istanbul became richer and more powerful? Here again is accentuated the need of preliminary knowledge of the historical background. We know that the opposite is the case. The Jewish community lost power and lost its political and economic standing since the end of the 16th century. The question that we have to ask ourselves now is what makes a society in decay to invest more and more in its death culture? And with this question to ponder about, I shall leave you, my friends. Thank you for your patience and attention, and goodbye.